Welcome to the Compendium Podcast, hosted by Leadership Books. In just moments, our host, Michael Stickler, will be joining us with a very special guest. Before we get started, I would like to introduce you to Michael. He's a 4-time best-selling author, philanthropist, publisher, and highly sought-after conference speaker. His passion is to see life-changing books find their audience. Books that will change your life, change your business, and change your soul. And he specializes in helping authors and business owners achieve publishing success. Won't you please welcome Michael Stickler?
Hi, thank you, Ron, for such a great introduction. This is Mike Stickler. I'm the publisher at Leadership Books, and we are really excited about having David Heeren here with us today. He has written a pretty fascinating book. And in a little bit here, I want you to just listen in deeply. He's got some tips for living today, especially. Now, David Heeren is an award-winning journalist. He's authored 17 books. A personal prayer identical to that of Isaiah in 6:8 led him to change his career emphasis from sports writing to Christian writing in 2017. Since that time, he has published 9 books with Christian themes, 5 of which dealt with biblical end-time prophecy. In his previous book, The High Sign, which identifies the most likely sign of Jesus' second coming, received a double 4-star perfect rating from the online book club and the highest rating award by the club. His upcoming Christian novel, The Year of the Lord, has been praised by literary critic David Dickerson and as by far the most exciting in his Steps series. So, David, I just want to welcome you to the Compendium Podcast.
Oh, thank you, Mike, for having me. Appreciate it.
So tell us a little bit about your book. What was the journey to get yourself into this? I understand it's the latest in the series you've been writing, but help us understand kind of the big picture. What are you trying to answer here?
Well, actually, I would like to read from a list on that because it summarizes it. It's a list from the book.
Okay.
So these are the themes of the book, and I am now reading. Taking care to avoid being deceived, refusing to acknowledge false Christs, loving those who hate us, even persecutors, resisting efforts to force us to deny Christ, and there's going to be some according to Jesus' own prophecy.
Sure.
Rejecting efforts to make us betray one another, refuting prophets who speak in error, or at least identifying them. I don't know if we have to refute them, but at least identifying them so we don't believe them and follow them. Standing firm in resistance to demonic spirits, preparing for the Lord's return, and praying about all of these things. I think that's a good summation of the book. Did you want me to get into how I got started with the
before we do that is a great list. And not just is it a great list, but it's a great reminder, really kind of the theme of our lives in living in these times. So go into some of them a little bit more in detail so people understand exactly what you're talking about here. Great themes, by the way.
Actually, these are all from Jesus' sermon. It's in Matthew 24 and Luke 21, the main places. And they just asked him, what will be the sign of one of the disciples asked him, what is going to be the sign of your return? And instead of just telling him that, which he did in about 3 verses in Luke and 4 verses in Matthew, but he gave him so much more. He told him the details of everything that's going to be going on up until that time. So obviously Jesus thought this was very important because he gave it the theme of how we should live more space by far in his sermon on his return than he actually did the details of his return. Although he did give us 7 details, which pretty make it pretty clear what the sign of the return will be. But he wanted to make sure we got things right. And one of the biggest things, and I'm not even sure it's on that list, is just trusting him. He said, don't be afraid. There's going to be scary things going on. He said, don't be afraid. He said, don't even worry. And that's in that sermon.
Right.
He basically, the implication is clear, that he wants us to just trust him and know that he's got it, just like, he was crucified, dead, and buried, and rose and disappeared into the sky. Well, we're going to go up there to be with him at some point in the future. But in the meantime, he's got things for us to do. He's got something for me to do. He's got something for every one of his believers to do. I'm convinced of that. And these things, whatever he leads you to do, you can count on it as being just as important as what I'm doing or Mike's doing. It's what he wants you to do. Then by all means, do it with all of your heart, because it's going to be important. There's going to be a lot of people saved in the process of hard times, which has been the pattern of Christianity from the beginning. The hard times, more people saved. The hard times, more people saved. This is the way it is. It's hard, but the outcome is just so great because Jesus has got this. Satan is going to be trying to kill and destroy, and everywhere he goes, there's going to be new Christians born again, because this is what happens. I've seen this happen several times in my life where people got scared and then they turned to the Lord. I know of 3 great preachers. This happened. One of them was afraid he was going to hell. One of them thought he was going to die. He was in the military and he thought he was going to die. And he wound up heading a national ministry. Hard times, Jesus makes the best of them. He really does. And just remember that. I have to remind myself.
So David, was this book written to answer people's questions and fears for the time we're in now? Was that kind of the premise as you were putting this together, or was this something that you had been working on and writing, and then it kind of came together with the difficult times that we're facing now?
Okay, well, we're transitioning now. You can see it happening. Where it's getting worse and worse and worse. We haven't yet hit the full-scale persecution, tribulation that Jesus prophesied. But he even said about that he was going to shorten it. For the sake of the elect, he was going to shorten that period of time. It's clear in the Revelation. That's one thing that the Revelation is liberal about, that it will be about 3.5 years, maybe less than that, because the exact time specified in the Revelation is a little bit shorter than 3.5 years. So Jesus was telling the truth when he said he was going to shorten that time. Right. We just have to believe it, and there's going to be opportunities for, about how Peter turned from being somebody who fled the scene when he got scared. He came back, preached much louder voice than I'm using now. And the whole city of Jerusalem heard this preaching and thousands got saved. So the consequence, the results of all this are going to be just amazing. It's going to be as scary as it is. It's just going to result in the greatest outcome ever.
So do you think that we've entered into the tribulation period that John speaks of in Revelation?
No, I think we're getting into the end time, which introduces that. That's a little bit into the end time period, according to Jesus. And he's saying this will happen, then this will happen, then this will happen.
Right.
So he's taking it in order. That's just a short way into the end time period. Then he says there will be tribulation, great tribulation. Persecution is what that word really means, right, in all nations. Well, we're seeing it in some, even in the United States, we're starting to see some zeroing in on Christians here. You know, you don't do that and you're going to be fired. You don't do this and you're going to be this. And that's actually happening. But it doesn't yet rival the scale of, say, Russia or China, where Christians are getting killed all the time.
So if somebody makes that commitment to buy and read your book, what are the pieces? What are the moments they're going to get out of that to help them through these difficult times?
My personal favorite, I didn't write this down, but there's a chapter, and it has 8 parts in it, one for each chapter that's in the Bible. My favorite thing in it is it's exemplary, and it is a good interpretation that everybody had, all of the biblical scholars had believed up until recently, that the Song of Songs is allegorical, and that the king Solomon, you can say, well, on one level, yes, it's Solomon, literally, but allegorically, it represents Jesus, and the bride, the Shulamite, represents the church, which is very specifically in the Bible, I think it's Revelation 19, specified to be the bride of Christ. So here we have a picture of Christ and his church, and it is a really clear picture, because right in the middle of it, the bride gets persecuted. She gets beaten up. And her response is so beautiful. You think that she's going to be not only moaning and groaning in pain, but wondering, well, why did this happen? I was trying to find him, talking about her husband, who in this case would be allegorically would be Jesus, but they got separated somehow. And this separation, I think it's Jonathan Cahn calls it the unpresence. He believes that this is allegorical too, and he calls it the unpresence of Jesus, where sometimes we just can't, I know it's with me, I can't always identify his presence.
Right.
But then he shows up, and this is what happens. And the bride, she does exactly the right thing. The first thing she does, instead of complaining and saying, well, why did you desert me and leave me to get beat up? She says, her loving expression, she just gushes with these lavish, loving praise of him.
Right.
And he responds in kind. It's a beautiful, beautiful segment of scriptures. Not only does she express her love in a time when she's hurting real bad. She's been beaten up. But forgiveness is automatic. She just walks right by that. She doesn't say, well, why this? Where were you? Which is a natural human thing to say. Where were you? She never says that. She just says, I love you, I love you, I love you. And this is an example for us. And Richard Wurmbrand expressed it beautifully in a couple of his books. He had this one story he liked to repeat because it was so beautiful. It was about this 12-year-old boy. His mother had been beaten up and killed, murdered in a communist concentration camp. And the boy comes in with a flower, hands it to the guard who had murdered his mother, and says to him sincerely, he says, my mother told me that I should love even those who hate me and who hurt me. And in honor of my mother, I'm giving you this flower. And then he walks out. The next day, this persecutor is standing next to Richard Wurmbrand and in tears in the prison camp, saying, I can't do this, and I couldn't do it anymore. And of course, Wurmbrand then leads him to Christ. This is what it's about. It's about love. It's about forgiveness. And then people will come looking for it, looking for that love. They want to share in it. It won't be a great evangelism thing at all. It'll be, well, I want this God. And in the Song of Songs, the women who are identified as the friends of the bride do basically the same thing. Up until now, they've been reticent, held back, a little sarcastic. And now they're saying, how can we help? How can we help? We've got a little sister. We'd like you to, it's just a complete reversal in attitude. And this is what the end time is going to be about. It's going to be about love, forgiveness, all the beautiful things that can happen to people. Not just the being beat up and murdered, which some Christians are going to be. But then we go up to be with the Lord. The Satan can't win in this one. He just can't.
Right. So what do you say to the Christian who says, well, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to be gone. I'll be raptured out of here.
I'd say to them that I don't see that in scriptures. But as my understanding of that dogma, I don't want to argue it and point my point, but my understanding of it is that they've got problems to work around, and they've kind of worked around it by saying, well, there got to be some people left behind in order to this and do that and witness to the lost. Well, who's going to be left behind? How do they know that they're not going to be among the ones that are left behind to do that? They don't know that they're going to be raptured pre-trib. Even if there were a pre-trib rapture, some people are going to be left behind, and that's right there in their books saying that. So what I would say to them, to people who are not sure about it or who are kind of adhering to that, thinking that they're going to be going up and they're not going to have to go through this. First of all, this is going to be the most rewarding time in the history of the world. There's going to be more people saved in this period of time than ever before. And I don't think God really wants us to run away from it. Wurmbrand himself got to the point where he said, I'm going to have to commit suicide if you don't give me strength, because I can't stand this anymore. Right. God gave him strength. It's going to be hard, but don't count on being raptured before the tribulation.
And it seems like it sounds like really this book would be a great aid to prepare you and strengthen you for even the trials that we go through in life, let alone the trials that will be facing us as humanity comes as we go through the birth pains and into the tribulation period. So when you were writing the book, David, what did you discover about yourself while writing it?
A lot of things. One of the things was, I get scared too. Just because God has shown me some things that I'm still human, I get scared, and I've talked to God about it, and I've kind of gotten to the place where Wurmbrand was, and so I said to him, I said, you may have to treat me like you did Wurmbrand. I might not be able to take it. You might have to really strengthen me, or else take me away from the evil to come. That's an alternative, and that is scriptural. A lot of people are taken away from the evil to come, and God carefully chooses who those are. My wife recently died, and I believe he mercifully took her away from the evil to come. And she was a very strong Christian, so that really didn't have anything to do with it. But he just knew it would be better that way for her. And I think that she had completed the work God had for her to do here. And the very last thing was, in her last 24 hours of life, she reconciled our family. So, we just don't know what his plans are for us, but whatever they are, they'll be right.
So, David, after this, what's next after this book?
Well, I think that book you mentioned in the novel, I think I've got to get a new edition of that, because that actually, even though it's been kind of commended, it was self-published. I had a publisher, and at the last minute, the publisher canned his fiction line because it wasn't doing well, and my book was out. So I self-published that. I mean, literally self-published it. It wasn't one
Sure.
of these companies now that call themselves self-publishers, but really aren't, because they're publishing it for you. I had just published myself. I took it to a printer and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But I think that particular book, I think it needs to be a new edition of it. And it is very timely for now. And I changed the title. It's now going to be Year of Our Lord. At that time, it was In His Steps Again. But the thing about the In His Steps books is they're about a single year. So I thought, well, why not call it Year of Our Lord? There's been enough books with the title In His Steps in them.
Yeah.
And of course, the original was that really great book. One of our English classics, I think.
Well, that's great. For those that are listening and watching here, you can get a copy of David's book right here, or maybe the link's right here. I'm not really sure, but somewhere on this page, you can get a copy of his book. And David, it's been very interesting to sit and talk with you. And I really commend the work that you are doing, preparing the Christian for the times that we're all living in. I really do appreciate that very much.
Well, thank you. I just feel like I'm doing what the Lord has called me to do. And believe me, at times it's not easy, but he never said it's going to be easy.
That's right. He just said he'd get you through it.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you for coming or being here with us on the Compendium Podcast. Now, the Compendium Podcast comes out every Monday and Wednesday, every day of the week, or I should say every week of the year. If you'd like to tune in, you can just come back. You can, of course, like us or follow us, and you will be getting that information and the next author that comes along. And until you come and join us again, may God bless you in this wonderful day.
Thank you for joining us for today's broadcast. I do hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And be sure to visit us online at leadershipbooks.store. There you'll find the works of some of the finest thought leaders today. And be sure to tune in here each week to gain even deeper insights from one of those leaders on the Compendium Podcast.